Welcome to episode 3 of Rooted Resilience, where we explore narratives of current and contemporary Two-Spirit LGBTQIA+ creatives living on colonized Nipmuc, Nonotuck, and Pecumtuck land known also as Western Mass. I'm Luke.
And I'm Em. And every second Tuesday of the month, we gather here to listen to these multi-talented culture creators with curiosity, intention, and a little bit of magic.
As soon as I read a book and saw the phrase like community organizer or activist and stuff like that, like those sorts of phrases, I became enamored at that idea. I became absolutely enchanted by the idea that there were people who just created events for their community to make things better.
In this episode, you will hear from Corrie Locke-Hardy, the queer owner of The Tiny Activist, a consulting business that focuses on social justice education and literacy. Corrie is also the author of The Revolution Will Be Well Fed, Recipes for Creating Community, a cookbook published by Raspberry Bow Press in September of 2024, and co-creator and co-organizer of the Queer Kidlit Camp.
Em and I talked with Corrie about the roots of their creative and activist practices and how their work has evolved. Here's Corrie.
My name is Corrie Locke-Hardy. My pronouns are she and they, and I am a consultant and community organizer living in the Hilltowns. And I have so many hustles that my therapist makes me count them on my fingers and tells me I'm not allowed to have any more, which is valid. But I run a small business called The Tiny Activist, and that focuses a lot on education consulting, social justice education, creating a school culture of inclusion, and that also kind of extends to doing things like equity and sensitivity readings for different publishers like Penguin Random House Canada or Tundra, and reviewing titles for Kirkus as well. And I recently released my first book back in September of 2024. It actually released on National Voter Registration Day, which was very exciting. And the title of that is The Revolution Will Be Well Fed, Recipes for Creating Community. And this was an absolute dream project of mine because I was able to sort of take and combine my first career in the restaurant industry, focusing on pastry and bread, with my second career of being an early childhood educator and creating a resource that focuses on bringing joy to communities by, having tasty snacks, but also there are lots of cool social justice essays and history tidbits in there, just to make humans think while their cookies are baking. I am also a bookseller at an indie children's bookstore called High Five Books that's in Florence, and I've been there for about 3 years. It's absolutely magical. We focus our book collection on books that focus on joyful, celebratory inclusion, and we have a lot of queer rep and social justice books and really focus on kids being seen and heard and celebrated.
We asked Corrie about what is blooming for them right now. In this next part of our interview, you'll get to hear about a special space they're cultivating for the queer kidlit community.
While I have done a fair amount of community organizing, both online and offline, last year, probably the biggest project that I've ever undertaken was an event that I called Queer Kidlit Camp. And that came out of a conversation with a couple author friends of mine. And we talked about how when we go to publishing or bookseller conferences, things like that. And I think anybody that's been to any sort of professional conference can relate to this. When you have affinity group meetings, there is like the LGBT authors luncheon and you sort of have that bright spot of queer community amongst a much larger multi-day event that, is everybody. And so we were kind of thinking, what if we had a whole event that was all queer folks? Because queer people know that when we all get together and there aren't any straights around, like magic stuff happens. We get to go deeper in our conversations. We get to, collaborate. We get to create. We get to fully relax and exhale a lot of times. And I think that that is such a special aspect of the queer community. And I think that queer folks in publishing were really isolated, and it was really important to me to be able to create a space where I felt like people could come together, share their experiences, and also talk about this industry that we're all in. So we had about 30 people come in from all across North America, from Canada and all across the US. And we've had a multi-day retreat, and we had authors, illustrators, editors, marketing people. We had influencers come in, and all of us were queer. We all came together. We talked about picture books. We spent time together. We also held panels and things like that. So in one aspect, it was like a regular publishing conference, but then the other half of the time, we really wanted to create like a nostalgic summer camp experience. So we did really fun things like tie-dye t-shirts and make friendship bracelets and, go on a nature walk to kind of allow all of us to take the time that we needed and the time that we wanted and be together and talk about how great queer lit is. So the first year was last year. The second year is this year. We're just ramping up planning, and I can't wait. I actually kind of feel like I'm at a really big moment in my career as a person who has done so many different jobs, because I've just followed the dopamine and not understood that I was following the dopamine all these years. But last year, I guess, my book came out. It was like the ultimate dream project of mine. I got to combine my love of baking and sharing things with people, and also share with them like the pieces of history that are ignored and purposefully obfuscated. So being able to work with a small publisher that did not censor me at all, and in fact asked really incredible questions like, would you like to write more about Palestine? Which I guarantee you was probably one of the only editors that ever asked that question last year in the US publishing market. But anyway, it felt really exciting and really scary to be able to design this perfect project that, I really felt represented me. And genuinely, I do feel like that happened. And the response has also been incredible. And I'm so tired, but it's a very exciting tired. It was a huge privilege to be able to release this book. And while I received some pushback of like soft censorship and, had to cancel events and stuff like that, that all kind of happened before this most recent administration change. I was worried that things would stop after this administration change, but like instead I have a West Coast tour coming up and stuff like that. People seem committed and excited, and like they're banding together, and like people understand that community will save us and not capitalism. But we also kind of thought that was going to happen in 2020 as well. And I feel like other organizers will also kind of understand this, that it's oh, it's hard to feel so positive. And also, like we've seen this before again and again, I feel like I am nourished in so many ways, physically, emotionally, by the queer community that's around in Western Mass and also, further. And I'm sure that we have all joked about this to a friend during a nasty breakup, of like, oh, what do queers do? We stick together, like we can pull ranks and we can, we're all in this together. But genuinely, queer people have always been around. And if people who didn't like us truly thought that they would win, then they would have stopped the smear campaign. They would stop attacking us. They would stop taking away our rights because it would be a done deal. But it's not. And because queer people are so resilient, unfortunately, because we've had to be and developed these skills, like that's what queer people do. We pull together, we shut the people out that aren't for us, and we make it work amongst ourselves, for ourselves, with love for our community. And that's what we've always done. And that's what we'll continue to do. And so I guess in that regard, I'm not worried because I know how powerful and magical queer people are.
Big thanks to Spring Equinox sponsor High Five Books. High Five Books is an inclusive kids community bookstore in Florence, Massachusetts, known for graphic novels, middle grade readers, and picture books. Their collection focuses on social justice and LGBTQIA+ themes.
Have trans, non-binary, or gender-creative youth in your life? If they are between the ages of 8 to 12, they may enjoy the Affirmations Book Club, held in person at High Five Books. This casual monthly book club for trans, non-binary, and gender-creative youth is held in partnership with our pals at Translate Gender. To join the book club, or if you have any questions for the High Five team, email Kinsey at highfivebooks.org. That's KINSEY at highfivebooks.org.
Now that Corrie has threaded the needle through all of her dynamic offerings, she shares more specifically about how she got to this moment. She lets us know that she was salty from the very beginning and shares how that attitude has been a key part of her recipe in engaging in activism creatively.
Yeah, I always had a different last name than my mother. And so my first last name was Malcolm, like Malcolm X. I didn't know any other comparison to explain how to spell that name. If that gives you any sort of vibe of who I was in 1995, I was like, hello, it's Malcolm like X, and my birthday is MLK Jr.'s actual birthday, not the holiday. Really. But yeah, I have always been this way. I have always been dragging around giant nonfiction books and getting angry. And it's fun. Honestly, it's great. There's just so much to get angry about. And that's why art is so great, because you can take all the frustration and then you just channel it, and it's cathartic. As soon as I read a book and saw the phrase community organizer or activist and stuff like that, those sorts of phrases, I became enamored at that idea. I became absolutely enchanted by the idea that there were people who just created events for their community to make things better. And I never lost sight of that. I just didn't quite figure out how to do it, because in a lot of my consulting work that I do, and I also touch on this in my cookbook, is typically what the quote unquote word activist looks like. If you just say it, the image that's in the media is a person holding a sign marching down the street, which is so great and valid, but also only about 2% of community organizing. And I didn't realize that when I was younger. And that's what I really want to impress upon younger people and younger generations is whatever you're most passionate about, somebody will need it. And whatever you love the most, if I'm trying to save the sea turtles, but I don't know how to swim, I can design posters. I can make phone calls. A social movement isn't just a bunch of people doing one thing. It's a whole bunch of people doing a whole bunch of things for a really long time. And a person doesn't have to change themselves in order to be an effective leader or an effective part of a movement. All it really takes is wanting to do something that you like doing and then deciding to do it on the behalf of others. And I think that's a really powerful thing to be able to understand. And I think it also opens up a lot of possibilities, and people can start to feel a little bit more empowered about what they can actually do in their communities.
Curious to hear about the cookie crumb trail that led Corrie into the restaurant industry and eventually baking and cookbook authorship? We were too. Here's Corrie.
I didn't actually have anybody that really taught me how to bake from scratch a whole bunch of different things. My mom and I would make boxes of mix sometimes and stuff like that. But I really got interested in cooking because I felt like it was almost meditation, and it kept me present. It was exciting. It was interesting. I first got excited and sort of realized the possibility that people can make cookbooks when I was a teenager, probably like maybe 13. I have like a very clear memory of being on my teen advisory council at the public library. And for an event, I made these little cakes that looked like Hello Kitty and Hello Kitty's sister, Mimi, I think. I really love Hello Kitty. And I had this thought where I was like, oh my gosh, people do this. People can make cute, fun, delicious things, and it makes other people happy. And that is an incredible way to spend your time. And I was just kind of dazzled by this idea for a while. And I've had a long and meandering education path. I did go to a very scammy culinary school, but not for pastry, for hospitality management. And so I was in the restaurant industry, and it kind of still didn't really occur to me that this was an option until my spouse and I moved out to Western Mass from Metro West Boston, where we had bought a piece of property. That's kind of how I got into the restaurant industry in the first place. And turns out I have raging ADHD, as many of us in the restaurant industry do. And it was kind of understanding the connection between the things that my brain wanted to find interesting and then kind of understanding how cooking came into that, and how not only how it made me feel better and more regulated, but I was in the restaurant industry for 9 years or so, and worked in a huge range of establishments, like a 24-hour Wendy's in a college town in the middle of Ohio, to really high-end fine dining restaurants in Boston. And while the quality of the ingredients are different, we're doing the same things. We're providing the same things for people. We're feeding them, but we're also providing a space for community. Whether or not people want to think about a fast food dining room as a community gathering place, it is, and it's the exact same type of community gathering place as you would have at a really fancy hotel bar where you're buying $18 cocktails and, paying tons of money for the teeny perfect little bread loaves that I made for you. And so that kind of always stuck with me as well, that food brings us together. It is a great equalizer. Like, we all have to eat ideally multiple times a day. And I don't know, just went from there, my friends. I understood kind of the connection with the restaurant industry and my neurodiversity after I was diagnosed with ADHD by my incredible therapist and psychiatrist, both who have ADHD. And, they were like, hey, you. And honestly, everything fell into place and it was amazing. And so it was very interesting to kind of reflect back and think about the types of activities and the types of coping mechanisms, essentially, that was helpful. And being kind of in like that wildly busy environment where you're like solving problems and it's like very frenzied is exciting. And I'm giving people cake. Like, at the end of the day, it's also not that serious because I'm giving you cake. So I just want you to be happy.
Surprisingly to us, we learned that there can be a weird side door to getting a cookbook published. Corrie shares more about their process and what it felt like to work with a Raspberry Bow Press team.
I got the opportunity to go to a free webinar that was just for people who was interested in writing a cookbook and like wanted to learn about what the process was. And it was just like a Q&A. And I had, kind of like had an idea. I've always wanted to do this. I had started this hashtag on Instagram called Sweets and Social Justice, just to kind of pass the time, where I was like making cookies, the type of cookies that was mentioned in like a book about a protest or something, And so I was just kind of combining food and activism and social justice and kind of, explaining things that way in like these little bite-sized pieces on Instagram. And so I kind of had this idea of pastry and food and social justice and kind of activism. And so then when I got the opportunity to attend this Q&A, it was by a lit agent at a culinary agency. And so at the end of the Q&A, then she was like, does anybody want to pitch me their book idea? And I'll, give you feedback. And I was kind of like, this opportunity doesn't happen very often. So I immediately said that I did and kind of gave this idea of what I was saying, the revolution will be well fed, which ended up being, half of the whole title. And I, kind of like pitched the agent this idea, and she was like, great, I have some tips. And, you should look up comparable titles. You should, XYZ, and just kind of gave me some stuff to do if I was really excited about it. So I started doing that, and that's probably the beginning of 2021. And then I basically just kind of Googled feminist cookbooks and just wanted to see what was out there. And I ended up finding this really cool small indie press that had not only made an entire cookbook and printed it on a risograph machine, which was incredible. And it was 4 colors, the whole book. It was so detailed. But this cookbook, they also had released it. So in 1919, there was a big suffrage fundraising campaign in Washington state, and they released the Washington Women's Cookbook. And in it was a whole bunch of recipes, and it was like to raise money for women's voting rights, except the only people that were contributors were affluent white women. So this small press and a couple of other local organizers, they decided to make a 2019 Washington Women's Cookbook, and they basically included everybody that was not included in the first book. And, it was like an ode to all of these women of color and these like working class women and stuff like that. And to sort of acknowledge and recognize that like they're the backbone of this movement and have been purposefully written out of history. And so after I found this book, I was like, I need to know more about what this publisher publishes. And so I went to their website and I'm kind of looking around, and at the bottom of the website, it just says, have a great idea, send me an email. And I was like, okay, I am good at following directions. So then I sent the publisher an email and I was like, hi, I read on your website. If I have a good idea, I should email you. This is my good idea. And we had a phone call and then a Zoom meeting. And the publisher, Michelle, and we just like got along really well. And she was like, I really want to publish your book. I was like, I would really love it if you would publish my book. And I officially got the book deal at the end of September 2022. And it came out at the end of September in 2024. It was just a couple weeks shy of 2 years that the whole process took to create the book. I didn't have the book when I got the book deal. I also didn't have an agent. The whole thing is wild. It's not the way things usually go, but again, I find a weird side door. Pro tip, find a weird side door. Right after I got the book deal, it was exciting and scary. And so since I was lucky enough to be a freelancer and a consultant, I was able to set aside 6 months and focus, not full-time, but, part-time on all the recipe developing and writing the manuscript. And I decided that when I got the okay, got the final approval that they wanted to actually, got the book deal. And it was like, okay, if this is a once in a lifetime opportunity, then I am going to do exactly what I want to do. And because if this doesn't come around, I want to know that what I did this one time was like the thing that I feel best about. So I decided to make all new recipes to put in the book. I didn't, I kind of had inspiration from recipes that I had used in the past, but I totally developed fully new recipes, and there are about 50 in the book. And the one thing I didn't want to do, I would read a textbook with a handful of recipes, but I also read research papers for fun, and that's not everybody. So I wanted to be able to make something that felt really accessible and interesting. And also, a lot of the consulting work I do is trying to convey to people that you are the one that has to do it. I can give you a framework, but you're the one that has to go and learn things and explore and be interested and make choices. So I also wanted to create something that did that as well. I wanted somebody to open the book and be like, that sounds delicious. And also, what is the prison industrial complex? Why is it on this granola bar recipe? Well, the recipe is called granola bars, not prison bars. And, so I wanted to create something that I felt like was fun and informative and also inspired people to learn more on their own, because that truly is what activism is. It's doing a whole bunch of work yourself and then taking the next step to join a direct action, movement, yada, yada, yada. And I also really wanted to make sure that we didn't lose sight of the joy, because joy is also such a key part of all of this, and it's so important. And not only is joy resistance in itself, but it's also what keeps us going. And, understanding that like the levity of the whole situation, it's okay to be silly. In fact, it's kind of encouraged to be silly, because that makes things a little easier in the end. So I am genuinely so thrilled with the final project, and truly feel like I do truly feel like it represents me as a person, I guess, even though a person is more than their career and the things that they do. It feels like a representation of the things that I hold dear. A cool part about the cookbook process was that was actually a key feature of working with one of these small indie presses, is the fact that I got to go out for the cookbook photo shoot itself. So typically, if a chef or an author gets a cookbook deal, they turn in the manuscript, and then the publisher will hire a prep chef and a photographer and a food stylist. They'll do everything, and the chef will see the finished product. And similar to how an author of a picture book won't see the illustrations until the book is finished. But I got to fly out there, and I cooked the whole book, and we had a studio. There was a full kitchen, and there was a food stylist. And so the publisher was there, and the cookbook designer, and the photographer. And it was really, really special and unique to be able to see the whole photo shoot process from beginning to end. And it was just so cool. Just hang out with rad people doing their job. And they were like, you just make the cookies. We don't need your opinions with any of the photography. And I'm like, no, you don't. I will go make the cookies. This is the best. It was fabulous. I loved it.
This podcast is part of the Rooted Resilience Project, made possible through the generosity of these supporters and sponsors.
Lemon Bakery, a queer and trans-owned bakery in Amherst, Massachusetts, run by Rory Hansen, providing homemade, locally sourced, seasonal baked goods with curbside pickup and delivery service.
Bombyx Center for Arts and Equity, a world-class performing arts space in Florence, Massachusetts, home to music, film, theater, dance, and memorable community gatherings. Visit bombyx.live to learn more.
And Mass Humanities and the Mass Cultural Council, championing the arts and humanities here in the Commonwealth.
To sponsor an episode of Rooted Resilience, please visit rootedresilience.substack.com/sponsors.
Now back to our show. The process of publishing a book doesn't end when the printed copy lands in your hands. Corrie shares more about what is happening in the here and now with her literary projects and what she is aiming for on the macro and micro levels of life.
Well, what I'm working on now is I am actually doing a West Coast book tour, which is exciting and something that I didn't think I would get to do. But the incredibly huge thing that is going to kick off this West Coast book tour is I'm actually giving a keynote speech at Purdue University in March at their Women in Leadership Institute conference. And that feels big. That feels really wild. That me, a little weirdo who lived all over the place, is, inspiring the youth, but also exciting. And it feels really cool. And also the fact that this contract is still being honored when this process started in 2024 and I will be doing it in 2025. It's nice to know that I can still go and that we can still gather and talk and have ideas, and it's not a total fascist police state yet. But, catch me in March. God, I am a feminist killjoy. I'm such a feminist killjoy. I can't help it. I can't help it. I've always been this way. I have always been this way. I am really, really excited for the second year of Queer Kidlit Camp. And because the first year was so magical and like so many connections were made, and honestly, we seeing the fact like we didn't actually advertise this publicly because we were worried about trolls. So, we kind of disseminated it throughout our networks. But in 2 weeks, we had fully reached capacity and for attendance. And most people were coming from out of town, which really spoke to the desperate need for these spaces and for queer only spaces. And so I think that's what I'm hoping, that people will become inspired to make things better around them. I talk in the book about how we have to change things systemically, but we also have to change things immediately. And that I try to live my life where I influence the micro and the macro at the same time. And I hope that other people kind of understand the nuances of that. And yeah, my motto is every day, I'm just trying not to be a jerk. So, and I don't really trust people who say that that's easy, because it's not easy. It's not easy to not be a jerk every day. It's really easy to be a jerk. So that's what I'm just trying to do.
We asked Corrie what we have asked each of our guests so far. What does rooted resilience mean to you? Usually at this point in the interview, we also offer some space for anything else our guests want to share with you, our listeners.
Rooted resilience means to me that we feel comfortable and whole in ourselves enough to sort of put down those roots and really sink into them, sort of whatever that means to the individual. And it also means at the same time, we recognize the situations that caused us to develop that resilience and sort of recognize the inherent positive effects that it will have, even if it's not great. Like, are my trauma responses awesome? Sometimes maybe there will be a lion after me one day, okay? We just don't know. But I think that's what it means. I just think it means to be comfortable in your whole self and sort of bring your whole self and everything that whole self has been through, to show up presently and in the community around you, whatever sort of that means. The advice that I would offer to folks is, if somebody is asking you for accountability, that's a huge privilege. It means that somebody cares enough about you to think that you can be better. And it means that somebody is taking the time out of their day to also potentially talk about something really triggering and upsetting for them on the behalf of making you better. And I think that accountability and activism, it's mostly really mundane and boring. It's making all of those decisions every day, and it's the similar I mean, it is the Haudenosaunee 7th generation principle. Every decision that we make, we should think about how it impacts 7 generations in the future. And I don't think that that is identically to how I look at the world, because I'm not Haudenosaunee, first of all, but it's like very much the same sort of thing. And it's recognizing the power that we do have. You know, am I frustrated when I rinse out all of my recycling and knowing that like giant corporations are the ones that's really causing all of this? Yeah, it does make me really salty, but like, I'm still going to try.
Thank you for listening to the Rooted Resilience podcast. If something resonated with you, we'd love to hear about it. You can email the show hosts at rootedresiliencepod@gmail.com or leave us a review on your favorite podcast streaming platform.
Dig deeper into our guests' work on our blog, where you can view all of our episodes and extended show notes and bonus content curated by Corrie.
You can also find information about all of our upcoming virtual and in-person events and subscribe for weekly updates at rootedresilience.substack.com.
If you liked what you heard, please share this episode, rate it, and leave us a review. It helps so much, and we appreciate it deeply. Until next time, take good care.
We are deeply grateful to all of the community donors who have contributed to support this project. Rooted Resilience is a grant and community-funded project, and we still have a way to go in meeting our goal to fund our first season. So if you're passionate about supporting queer creative futures through the preservation of our histories, please visit givebutter.com/rooted-resilience to make a donation today. All dollar amounts are vital and greatly appreciated.
Thank you for centering Two-Spirit LGBTQIA+ creatives with us. This work is more meaningful than ever as we face even steeper challenges in preserving our history for future generations.